Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. And you? Excellent. I wanted to give this to you because I really would like to set up course. Yes.
Okay.
Well, do you have it for supplemental for online courses?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, that's
Do you
kind
have,
of
do you have the course identifier?
yeah.
What you are you nursing?
Yeah.
Do you have a class number?
Yeah, I'll have to get it.
That's the way I usually
Okay. Great. So let me, I'll put down there and get it back to you. Thank you.
All right. I have a couple of announcements. First of all, I found a notebook. Is this book familiar to anybody? No. Okay. Well, if you're missing a green water bottle, a green water bottle. Okay. So a couple of really housekeeping type things that so we talked about, and it was in all the call and everything, that we're going to have a continuing community as we keep going after this. We're going to have to meet once a month. But we have two problems that our committee was not able to solve, or just actually I should say chose not to solve. Decided to throw it out to the group. One of them is, what do we call it? What do we call the continuation of boot camp? Because I don't like the continuation of boot camp. So what do we call this group as we go forward? Okay, so what do you want to name ourselves as a unit, as a learning community? That's the first problem. So I'm telling this now because we're going to, on Thursday or Friday, we're actually going to try to vote on a name and try to come up with a name. So if you have ideas, discuss amongst each other. If you have ideas, shoot me an email or come and tell me or something, and I'll collect a bunch of ideas, and we'll just do a vote at the end of the thing and decide what we want to call ourselves. Okay, that's the first. Whoa, depends on which way I turn my head, it gets really loud. So that was the first thing, and then the second part of it is we'll have monthly meetings, but we want to create a virtual community as well. So so that we can disseminate. As Stan finds the newest article about how to use Twitter in the classroom, he can post that somewhere that everybody can get it. So that we can continue first the dialogue, but also continue the learning experience and continue connecting with each other in a virtual way. So what we want to know from you too, and we'll discuss this later, but I want you to think about is what are we going to use for that? So, so just as an example, a couple possibilities, we can create a closed Facebook group that if everybody has Facebook, we can all create a closed Facebook group, and we can all get into that group, and that will be our group. Or we have the videos, which you guys are on right now, which is kind of a social media type thing. We can continue using that. There's other options out there, and so if somebody has, I want to throw it out to you because we want to actually try to do something that is comfortable to you, not comfortable to us. Because generally people that are organizing and are the mentors, we can become comfortable with whatever you want, or we probably are already there. So if you decide you want to do LinkedIn, we probably all have LinkedIn accounts, so we can jump in there. So whatever seems to be the most effective method for you. If you don't have any idea, that's fine. But if you have some ideas, or if you're not opposed to something, or if you're vehemently opposed to say Facebook, then you should probably let me know that. Because if I don't get any ideas, we might do something like that. Vehemently opposed. Okay, so we still have vehemently opposed Facebook. But just think about ideas. Those of you that are more techy or have been involved with other groups that have groups like this, we could consider other things. We could consider using a trial version of like Canvas, which is an LMS, to create a group in Canvas. We can do that for free. We could try something like that. There's lots of options here. We could have used Sakai, but it's gone now, I believe. Completely gone now? Yeah, so no Sakai. But something like that. So we can create a group in WildWeb, think of some ideas of what we might want to do. So those are the things I would like you to, that's your homework for the next couple of days, I guess I would say. Just think of a name. What do we want to be? Who are we? What are we as a group? And then also how we want to stay connected virtually after this. Okay. So and any suggestions are welcome. So we're gonna do the morning sessions. We have the gaming one, and then we also have a nice presentation by Athena and Cody, which is actually going to give you some ideas how to engage students from a student's point of view. So that's kind of a nice change up a little bit. Instead of us telling you what we think as all as instructors, Cody and Athena can tell you a little bit about what the students think. And then after that, we're going to have a 10-minute little section on supplemental instruction, and Emily's going to do that for us. It's just going to be a little short one to kind of tell you what it is, because I was getting some information that people have said I don't actually know what that is, so I didn't know if I should go to that. So I'm going to have Emily just kind of tell you a little bit about supplemental instruction. after that, and then we'll have our open free time. Is there any comments, questions for the good of the group, information stuff that needs to go on now? Okay. Then I think without further ado, we'll roll right into the presentation. So there's 3 of us on this presentation. It's myself and Karen Williams and Meg Wood. And we're going to kind of do this in 3 parts. We all took our class basically and used game principles to create, to rebuild our class. So I'm going to start because it was kind of my brainchild and I talked everybody else into doing it. Yeah, imagine that. So the thing is that, why would you do this? Okay, so I've been fascinated by games. I wouldn't call myself a gamer because I honestly, there's 2 problems I have with gaming, and one of them is that I don't choose to spend my time that way. Although you could say I was a gamer because, you know, cross-country skiing is a game. So you can call me a gamer in a way. I just do it a different way. And I'm at a computer screen a lot during the day, and I really want to be outside on my free time. So this is part of my not sitting in a gaming thing, but I really like them, and I like the idea of them, and I think they're very powerful. And so for a long time, I went around telling people in these kind of groups, you should try gamifying your class. And they're like, yeah, right, you try gamifying your class. And I was like, telling them that, and I was like, maybe I should try gamifying my class before I tell everybody else to do it. And so I decided I should do this. Now, it was a catalyst happened here. I've been thinking about it for a while, but here's what I felt, and I'll bet most of you feel the same way. The idea of creating a game for your class or a game of your class is overwhelming. You can't imagine coming up with something that would compete with World of Warcraft. Or compete, right? I mean, how do you do that? That's impossible. I can't do that. I have a lot of really great graphic skills and programming skills. I can't create a game that can compete with anything. It's hopeless. And so that's what you feel like, right? That's what you feel like. And probably most of you, how many people feel kind of like that? If you've thought of it at all. It's like, I think it'd be cool to do the game, I'm not going to be able to do that. Okay. So what happened about this time was, we read a book. We have a group called eLearn on campus, if anybody would be interested in joining this group. It's actually a group of a lot of mentors, actually probably all the mentors are in this group. And it's just a group of people some of them are educators, they're all educators, but some of them are a lot of librarians in that group, people from all over campus that are just interested in using technology to teach in some way or other. And it's called eLearn. Sorry, it's called eLearn. Is our group. Yeah. And I'm sorry. Yeah, and I talk really fast, and I'll try to slow down. Honestly, though, this is kind of slow. I mean, you know that. When I get really excited, I go really fast. So I'm kind of trying to slow down. I'll try more. I'll try. So we have this eLearn group, and the point of the eLearn group was to bring people that were all interested in technology and teaching together so that we weren't reinventing the wheel. So I didn't create a tutorial on Twitter, and Stan didn't create a tutorial on Twitter, and Debbie didn't create a tutorial on Twitter. We just used Stan's because it's better than all the rest of ours. No, but because we didn't need to recreate everything. And we also could learn stuff. There's so much stuff going on, and so it's kind of like this group in that we're trying to share the information as much as possible. That's the point of this group. One of the things we did was we read a book. We've been trying to do more than one book, but so far we got through one book. And it's called Reality is Broken by David Godwin. Why games make us better and how they can change the world. Okay, so Rachel, who did the presentation of the day, if you ask her what her goal with teaching is, she says it's because I want to change the world. And that's why she teaches. Okay, and so I think this is why a lot of us teach, really, right? We're passionate about our area, and we're trying to change the world by helping students do better. That's what we're trying to do. And so, this was an interesting book. So what was most fascinating about this book is that she goes through and she explains games that are not really high graphic, exciting shooter games. She talks about those too, but she talks about the game that you play, that she started playing with herself when she was injured or sick. One of them was sick. Anyway, and she was trying to get healthy. I think she had, anyway,
she had a concussion.
That's right. She had a concussion, and she was trying. It was a really, really severe concussion, and she was trying to come back from that, and she was trying to figure out how to motivate herself to do that. And so, simple games. This is a paper and pencil game, basically. She just wrote down stuff, and it was a paper and pencil game. She'll talk about a game that she played that they played a graveyard. Tombstone
Holder?
Hold'em, Tombstone Hold'em, which is just a game that you try to find, it's a poker game that you try to find the letters on tombstones. And it's just a game, and it's very simple. These are very simple games. And one of there's several games in there. And when I saw this, I thought, a game can be simple and it's still interesting. When we were kids, we played tic-tac-toe. I mean, what? There's nothing interesting about tic-tac-toe. There's no graphics involved. There's nothing about that. I still have tons of student athletes that do crossword puzzles. They do them on the computer now, but they're just still crossword puzzles, right? And so doesn't have to, what I brought from this game, or from this book, was it doesn't have to be amazing graphics and immersive environments and, all kinds, it doesn't have to be. It can just be a simple game, right? And that's really important. Oh, thank you, Karen. Try the spacebar. Spacebar. There we go. So what I did is there's a lot of great game principles that are actually really applicable to teaching. But I'm going to talk about just 3 of them that we did. So what I did then was, instead of saying I'm going to create a game for my class, I made my class into a game. Now, before you run out the room screaming because you're like, there's no way I'm making my class in a game, let me explain something. Your class is already a game. It's just badly designed. Okay? So what do I mean by that? Okay? So what is a game? First of all, your class is based on points, right? Does that sound like a game? Is that like a game? All games are based on some kind of points, some kind of ranking system. Your class is based on points. Everybody's is, because we all have to turn in grades. So in some way or another, your class is based on points. So that's important. There are objectives and there are barriers, right, in your class. And you don't want that many. You'd rather have objectives than barriers, but their barriers do exist. You create them often unconsciously, but they exist. And students have to get through these things to get to their objective, which is the A, right? That's what they want. They want the A. Because you set up your class with the idea that the ultimate goal is to get the A. Okay? Now, in this process, in a normal class, I have set myself up. This is what I'm not saying in a normal class. In my class prior to doing this, I set myself up as an obstacle. I was the obstacle, right? I'm the boss fight at the end of the level. That's me. I'm all about that. I am the big monster that you have to kill at the end of the level, because they have to figure out what to do to get me to give them the A. That's the goal. And that's what the goal is. You talk to students, this is the goal. They're part of, and I was like this, I'd be like, you just gotta get in there and figure out exactly what the teacher wants. That's how you get good grades. I was a good student. But you get in there and you're figuring out, okay, well, what kind of questions do they ask on the exam? What kind of paper do I have to, how do I have to change my writing style to fit what they're doing so they'll give me an A? And that's what students do. That's what they do, right? So you are the barrier. It's not really the grade, it's you, okay? So that's already a game. But it's not a good game. It's a poorly designed game because they also don't know all the rules, do they? They're trying to figure out the rules, right? You don't just say, okay, you have to write in this way to get an A. No, you write a paper, you turn it in, and then I grade it, and they're like, okay, now I learned a few rules, but that was a painful way to learn it, right? So, we don't give them all the information they need. We don't even make all the information, accessible all the time. We make it difficult. And so the idea of taking the game principle, the idea of I was going to turn that around and try to change that whole scenario. So you can go on. So 3 things I really focused on. One was multiple submissions. Okay, so if you play a game, okay, so I jump in to how many people have played Angry Birds? Angry Birds. Okay. If you went into Angry Birds and you had 3 birds and you threw all 3 birds and they died, but you missed and you didn't knock down the pigs, right? You didn't kill all the pigs, right? That's it. Game over. Can't ever play again. What kind of game is that? That's the stupidest thing you've heard. It's not being useful at all. It just goes away and shuts itself off and disappears off your device. Wow. Wait a second. How am I supposed to learn anything here? What's that about? So that's what we do in school, though, right? That's what we do in school. We say, here's an exam, or here's a paper. I have a paper-based class. Here's a paper, and you turn it in, and you got enough. Too bad. Moving on. Doesn't matter if you learned it. Doesn't matter if you, now, I give you all kinds of feedback, but it doesn't matter if a chance to actually improve that. So when I go in and take my 3 birds and only kill 2 of the 3 pigs, I don't have a chance to do that until I get it right. Right? And then what happens, and this is an interesting thing that happened in my class that I did not expect. So you kill all 3 pigs, so the first time you kill all 3 pigs, you're like, yeah, woo, moving on, right? And then what happens? You go through and you only got 2 stars. Why did I only get 2 stars? Well, what? I killed all the pigs. Why did I only get 2 stars? And so then you're like, okay, well, how do I get more stars? Okay? Because you just want to now, because there's a possibility of 3. I want 3. Why can't I get 3? And you play this one level 20 times, and you kill the pigs every time, because you want 3 stars. Okay? So the multiple submission thing, hugely important. It's hugely important. And I'll explain how that works in my class. But the ability that they can turn it in, learn something, I have to give them feedback, learn something from it, and do it again. Okay? That's really important. And then the next thing is resources. So so now we have a different scenario. I have a challenge that they need resources for. So instead of saying, I need to read chapter 5 of the book, and they're going, okay, why do I need to read chapter 5 of the book? It'll be good because it'll be on the test. Okay. All right, I guess I'll read chapter 5 of the book. Suddenly, in order to actually get through the next thing, get through the test at all, they have to actually find these resources. You can give them a bunch of them, and they have to actually go through and figure out what's going to help them. They have to actually use them. Because in a game, okay, so we'll use a little more sophisticated game. We'll use a really sophisticated game like Mario. Okay, we'll go old school here and go to like our Mario games. When you ran along in Mario, or even Pac-Man, you guys play Pac-Man? Anyway, you run along and you find things that make you like invincible for. You get a star and you're invincible for like 10 seconds. Come on, you're invincible. And you get all kinds of stars and you're knocking things off the side. It's awesome. And you get these resources, and then you find out that once again, like the pig thing, you go through and you're like, I didn't get as many points as I could have. What happened there? And you realize there's all these little hidden things all over the place. The more sophisticated games have tons of these, right? They're everywhere. There's things hidden under rocks, and you know there's something mildly glowing in a corner, and you wander over and you touch it, and it's like, woohoo! I got a sword, yay! You know, these are what happens. And you gotta look for these. The other thing that happens in modern games is if you go online somewhere and look for World of Warcraft, for example, you'll find huge blogs. I mean, tell us about those, man. I mean,
well, basically, you know, there's a wiki out there that probably has 100, almost 200,000 pages telling how to navigate the system that people have put up on, you know,
right.
Other gamers said, I figured it out. Let me tell you.
Exactly. So you're finding these resources all over the place. And what were assignments, which were just things that they had to get through to get points, now become resources of things they need to learn so that they can get points on the ultimate goal. So that they can beat the boss fight at the end of the level. Okay, that's what happens. You change your assignments into resources that they actually need the information to actually complete this task. So that's the next part. And then the last part is really important, is choice. And this actually ended up being, I actually pulled these out of the class afterwards. I didn't go in with these 3 in mind. I went in with a bunch of game principles in mind. But these are the 3 that the students pulled out, basically in their comments and the class evaluations and things like that. And so that's why I chose these. But choice was huge. I gave them all kinds of choices. I didn't make them do anything. I let them choose. So what that means is, yeah, I did make them do something. I made them do something because I'll explain how this works, how you actually manage to give them tons of choice and still have your academic rigor in there. I'll explain that in a minute. But the choice was huge, and ultimately they could choose how they responded to assignment, how they met the objectives for an assignment. They could choose that. They could choose which assignments to do. They could choose a lot. Sometimes they couldn't choose. There were the boss fight at the end of every level that they had to do. They had to do a couple of things every level. But there were a lot of things they could choose. And that was huge to them. And that ability to choose made it so that they felt they had some control over their learning experience. And that was actually ultimately the biggest thing, was that they felt like they could actually, of giving them choice, gave them the feeling of ability to actually choose what happened to them in this class. And I mean as far as grades and as far as learning. And that was really important. So I gave them the choice of their activity or their path, the direction they would go through my class, the time, not all of us did the same things, but the time and their topic that they were researching. So basically they're doing a research class. And ultimately they were able to choose their grade. And this is an interesting thing. They felt they could actually choose their grade. I mean, theoretically, we say they can choose their grade now, theoretically, right? We're like, you can choose your grade, you just have to work harder. But it's not always necessarily true. I mean, if I don't give them choices on how listening to Michelle's talk yesterday, if I don't give them choices on how they can best demonstrate their knowledge to me, if I don't give them that choice, then I don't necessarily give a student who is lousy at giving an oral presentation, I may not give them a choice of a day, because they may never, ever, no matter how hard they work and how hard they try, they may never be able to give me an A presentation. So I don't actually give them a choice. If I give them a choice of giving an oral presentation, of giving a paper, of giving creating a multimedia extravaganza, or creating a game or something like that, then they actually do have a choice. So that's important. So let me explain really quickly what I did to my class. Yeah. So this is the course. In the beginning, so I was playing with the brand new time I was saying had the brand new you can like fade stuff in thing yesterday. And I was playing with that just randomly, and this one fades in, and I have to get rid to stop fading. So whatever. Maybe it's a glitch. It's brand new. It still says beta. So here's what I did. I had 5 quests. So this is basically 5 units. It's an online class. 5 quests. I call them quests. I use game language much more than Meg did. And I don't think it's important. In fact, the game language kind of scares a lot of my adult students. Some of the students were like, yeah! But I have a lot of adult students, and some of them were like, I was really scared of the game thing to start with. I don't think why you're calling it quests. I just want to do my own work. So, that's something to keep in mind. I kind of, it made it more fun for me, which in turn made it more fun for them. Just because I was excited about it. But I called it quests. They were worth 200 points, so the class was worth 1,000 points. Because there were 5 quests and 200 points, okay? Each quest had 300 points possible, okay? And I just told them that they were worth 200 points. So this is where the choice comes in. I had assignments that added up to around 300 points. Sometimes it was 284, and sometimes it was 315. It was not set. It was random, depending on what I came up with for that quest. And that they had that amount of points to choose which pieces of that they did. So if you teach online classes, you know that sometimes online discussions are like pulling teeth, right? Okay. So my online discussions became a choice. They could do an online discussion or not. That way the people who were stoked on online discussions, because there's always people that love you did your evaluations back if you're an online teacher, and what you did, you had students who were like, God, these online discussions, why do we have to do online discussions? And they're like, my favorite part of class was the online discussions! And you're like, what do I do with that? Half of them hate it, half of them love it. What you do is you make it optional, and the ones that love it do it, and the ones that hate it don't do it. You don't have to worry about that. That's what I did. So there's options like that. There's options you can do. Some people love a journal. They love the journal. They love writing to me and telling me stuff about how things are going. And some people hated the journal. They thought it was just busy work. Well, they didn't have to do the journal. There are all these options. And I had assignments all these assignments, most of the assignments were actually in my class already. I went and found extras because I didn't have 300 points worth of assignments. I had 200 points worth of assignments, basically. And then there were 1 to 2 required elements in every quest. So these were the boss fight of that level, basically. And what that means is that there was something in the quest that they had to do. Absolutely. So the other ones, they could choose whatever they wanted, right? These ones they absolutely had to do, and they absolutely had to get a 70% to move on. They could not leave that quest until they got 70% on the required elements, period. That was it. There was no room moving around on that. But they could resubmit as many times as they wanted. So what that meant was that they could turn something in, get a 25% on it, and then go, we didn't understand that, and redo it, and come back with more, and get more until they got something. And when they did, they could move on. I did allow them to move at their own pace. That's not necessary. I just did. And I liked the way it worked. It worked out all right for me. I'm not sure it works for everybody's class and everybody's the way it works, but I allowed it to happen. So let me tell you what happened in my class then. So I'm thinking to myself, as a very successful student in college, okay, I knew how to play the game of school really well, okay? I had it pegged. So I figured, I'm looking at this from a student perspective. I say, okay, there's 200 points possible. If I get 180, I got an A for that quest. I always want to pad that. So the first couple, I'm going to get like, you know, 190 something, 100 to 200, good, move on. They can get as many as they want. They actually can get 300 points. They just can't take them off, right? And so I'm thinking that's what they're going to do. They're going to just kind of do what they need to do to get the A, because that's the goal, generally, right? That's kind of what all the students will tell you. But we don't want that to be the goal as professors, right? That's not our goal. But that's their goal. Their goal is to get an A. Our goal is to actually teach them something, and their goal is to actually get an A. Okay? These are not, you know, they're not compatible goals. They're kind of compatible, they're not entirely. So what started happening almost immediately, which just surprised me, and it actually started snowballing, was they were doing 280 points. Why? Why are they doing 280 points? I was like, so the first quest I was thinking, remember, you can only take 200 points on. So if you do 280, that's 80 points that evaporate. Or, they just don't exist in my grade book. They exist in, they didn't care. They didn't care. They just wanted to do it. So they actually got, I think we were in some ways chasing the stars. And there's 300 points here, I want to get all 300 points. And some of them said that I just liked, it changed the thing from trying to get to an A to actually learning this stuff. So they're like, I felt like I could do a lot better on the paper if I actually did all the assignments first. Or I thought I could do a lot better on these big assignments if I did all the assignments, but they all were valuable. And I was like, cool. Yeah, right. I tried to make them all valuable, so I'm very excited that you found them all valuable. I still think it's odd, but as an educator, that was incredibly exciting to me because they were suddenly doing it not because they wanted an A, because they already had an A. They had 200 points. They already had an A. All they had to do was take the 200 points. All they needed to do was take 180 points and move on. That was it. But they didn't. They took. If you took all the points, not taking out, not throwing out the extra points that they got. Took all the points for the semester. At the end of the semester, the average point total in the class was like 997 or something. Like 1,000 points is perfect. And that means that a huge amount of the class had way more points than they needed. And they really did. I had one student that was all upset because one of the options was a collaborative thing. It's a collaborative peer review type thing. And she was all upset because she couldn't do it because she was going through the class so fast that nobody was going with her. And so she couldn't really find anybody to peer review with. And she was upset because that was the only thing in the entire class that she didn't do. That was it. Every tiny 2-point everything she did, but she couldn't do that one because she couldn't find somebody to keep up with her. And so I had a couple of students that were kind of like, well, I would have done more, but I couldn't get it. It was kind of amazing to me. So I think that I'm going to let Karen go over and talk about her stuff now. And then we can go to so control. The crew students had control. I had to let go of control, which was an important piece of this. And the students got to control their own learning experience. And boy, when I gave them that control, they really took it. They ran with it. And the cool thing about it was actually that I had a bunch of students, adult students, that when they started, they were like, so what do you want me to do? And I'm like, I don't care, choose. And they're like, no. What do you want me to do? And I'm like, no, choose. And they're like, no, I don't understand that. Sure, I don't understand that. Just tell me what to do. They're like, I know you said choice, but clearly there's things you want us to do. I'm like, no, I want you to choose. I'm like, no. And I actually had these long email exchanges with students saying, no, just choose something. I don't care. and that student, the one student that I just sat with for a week, was like, no, really, just get in there, see what you want to do. And she's just like, no, but what do you want us to do? I'm this one. That sheet at the end, she actually sent me an email and said, when we started, I thought this was the craziest, stupidest stuff ever. I did not understand what you wanted. I did not understand what was going on. I did not want to do this. And at the end, she said, after the first quest, I got the hang of it. She said, this was the best class I ever had. It was amazing. I could control what I was doing. And I could, when I had one of her kids in the hospital or something, so I could just not do it for a week and come back and do it again. And it was fine, and it didn't matter at all. And so there is some resistance to very beginning. It takes an education, because we don't give them a choice. They haven't had choice probably since they started kindergarten, really, like real choice. And suddenly you're giving them all kinds of choice. And they're like, I don't understand what that means. Don't ask them to choose. So, yeah. Yeah, well, and I think that one was just that one was just, I changed from a boss. They didn't fight me anymore. I became a resource. So instead of me being the thing they were trying to get by, I became somebody to ask them questions. And they emailed me things, and they said, well, how do I do this? And what would be the best thing to do here? And that changed our relationship entirely, and it was amazing. I really enjoyed it.
I'm going to back up and add some stuff also, just because there's some pieces, like, so what do we teach that might be good for you to know. So Christy and I teach a course on alternate semesters for the Bachelor of Applied Science program called AGRI 3000, Discovering and Utilizing Ideas and Information. And Meg teaches English 4010, Technical Writing and Professions. And it's interesting, therefore, that the kinds of things that we're going to talk about really are not content specific. They can be used to whatever extent you choose to in a variety of course settings. So Christy teaches in fall, I teach in spring, and we've been teaching AGRI 3000 for, you've taught it at least 4 years, I want to say, maybe 5. I've been teaching it 2. And, we both were in the discussion group that read Reality is Broken. And as an older teacher, I recognize some of these as mastery learning principles in contract learning, because things cycle back, don't they? But unlike Christy and Meg, I also was really intrigued by what video games have to teach us about learning and literacy. And I recommend this greatly. Christy's super annoyed it doesn't come as an electronic book, which makes no sense when you're talking about video games. What are you going to do? But I'm going to leave it here so that you can leaf through it, because he talks about learning principles and how things can, what is a really good game. And Jane does that too. But Christy, as she was redesigning our course, and we met and talked about it, and I said, well, absolutely, we have to try it. I mean, that's just kind of how I live my life. How can I criticize something except for bungee jumping or jumping out of perfectly good airplanes without having tried it myself first? This seemed a little less risky than that. So, of course, we had to try it. Christy took the bulk of the work, and I really commend how in a very few weeks she totally revamped the course by reorganizing and creating this path builder where at the end of each path there's a quiz, which is just them checking off which elements they've done so that we know at that point to total. We're grading and giving feedback all the time before the next quest opens for them. So there's that idea of levels and leveling up that's built into these games. The other thing, and I'm not a gamer either, although I love challenging board games, and when I was investigating this, my son, I'm talking to him about that. He read both of those. He's 30. And he said, well, Mom, why don't you play Portal with me? I said, because I don't know what they're talking about. I've never done this. Show me a game. Get me in a game. Even though I'd sat and watched them play World of Warcraft, listened to their discussions, which I just loved. And I started with the, what's a good game principle? And the first thing is a good game prepares you and lets you try things and experiment, and it gives you the clues. As Christy said, they have to find the resources, but what she didn't say is every one of our units has a map. Each quest has a map. And it tells them what a lot of their choices are with a brief description. Then, of course, in the course shell, it'll have way more on each of those. But it tells you kind of what to expect. And then there's scrolls and magical items, which are these additional resources that they have to find. So it prepares you. you feel like you can try things safely because something is there coaching you and giving you clues. In Portal, there's this little voice that comes out periodically telling you what you should try or what to do next. And I'm terrible visual spatially, that's probably why I'm not a gamer. And so Portal was challenging, but I felt like I had this support. Well, now the students feel that the map, squirrels and magical items, and the instructor are that coach and support so that they can safely explore and level up and master what they need to learn. You know, the first quest drives them nuts. A lot of them freak out. But then when they realize, oh, okay, so I can get feedback, and we are rigorous in our feedback. Our rubrics are challenging, and we don't edit. We give them feedback on the elements that they have to figure out and redo. We make sure that those required elements directly tie to the final paper they're going to do, so everything's skill builds. In a good game, everything's skill builds, and you're going to level up, and you're going to be able to do well. There's immediacy in the course, immediacy of the content, because all of the resources that they're finding are current, they're useful. There's immediacy of our feedback, and we'll talk about that at the end. But those are some other principles, and I highly recommend this book because they really talk about what are good teaching and learning principles and how is that illustrated in a game. That's going to allow you to take this as far as they can go, yeah. As far as you choose to. You know, sometimes flashbacks are teaching in North Carolina. So, it really is. It's outstanding, and there's several Portal versions out now. There's at least 2, might be 3 by now. But yes, Portal is a real game, and it is visual perceptual, where you have to figure out how to get from one place to another to get the objects and open and close things that you need to. That is just outstanding from a problem solving and a visual perceptual. I actually have made it through several levels finally, but oh my goodness, because I can't, you know, it's why I've sewn through armholes and put, you know, gossets in the wrong place and dresses, because I can't visualize what the pattern's telling me is going to happen. So, boy, Portal was challenging, but it's good. So, we looked at and just started to gather some preliminary data, and we'll continue to do this because we looked at the student grades and retention records from the year that both of us taught it, and then the year that we taught it in a revised form. And we looked at, you know, how many students were enrolled, and when did they drop, and how many dropped. And before game theory, you know, we had about 27, 26 students. They would frequently, my section, they dropped within the first month. I think I scared them a bunch. But lots of times they withdraw later. After game theory, the retention changed. Not significantly, but somewhat. And what the retention numbers should tell you is the students who withdrew frequently had done nothing. Would you say that's accurate, Christy? It's not that they were moving along and got behind. And in a traditional class, if you get behind, you're dead. In the revision, you're not. Because you can change the pace for yourself. And I'll show you some student quotes about what students thought about that. And that's a revelation. Now, I've taught in a blocked class. This is a little more like that, but not completely. But it did turn over the pace to the student rather than to us. Had to be done by the end of the semester. We put suggested due dates for the major required elements. If you want to have kind of a workable pace, here's what we suggest, but that's up to you. want to put the next one? Okay. So grades. Remember, Christy taught fall, I taught spring. So initially, you know, she had more A's than I did, but we had a lot of F's before the shift. After the shift, we had far fewer F's. And those that did, again, are people who didn't withdraw or just chose to get behind and didn't complete for whatever reason and didn't ask for an incomplete. Very few D's. Yeah. Fall was Christy's class, so she taught fall 2010 and fall 2011. I need to revamp this for the article we're reading, thank you, because that's not clear to anybody with me. And then spring, I taught prior to revision, and then spring 2012 was after revision. Look at the change in grades. Now, a criticism that we get sometimes is, ooh, grade inflation. And for us, and I can't speak for Christy, but I'll speak for myself, I would rather I knew that students were learning than worry about, oh my gosh, I've got too many A's. I know without a doubt, because of the assignments they did, all of which, every single one, relate to the course objectives and the learning goals, and their level of mastery, that they mastered the content, for sure. And if I'm doing what I should as an instructor, and they're doing what they should as a student, why should I penalize them for doing well?
I just jump in here really quick too. The thing is that, interestingly enough, I feel that the A's from the fall 2011 were way better. The students did
The quality of the work.
The quality of the work was way better. They did a lot more to get that A once I made the change than they did to start with. The difference was they could choose to do it. And some of them struggled with some of the other elements in the past. And what really changed was, a couple of things was that I didn't grade differently, but how I felt about grading was different. So, for example, when they turned something in and they really did terribly, I would not necessarily give them a worse grade this time around than I did the first time, but I felt entirely differently about it, and they did too. So what I mean by that is I would go through and I would say, I could just say, straight up, this is what's wrong with this, you have to change this, this is what's going on, and I felt okay with it. And before it would be like horrible for me. I would be this horrible mess. I hate giving you bad grades. And I give it back, and then the student would say, thank you very much for your feedback, and they would fix it. Like, it was, instead of before, I would turn that back, and I'm like, oh, great, I earned this point here, and you didn't give me a point here, and I would do this fight, and there was no fight. They give it back, and they'd be like, oh, maybe I need to change that. And you're like, yeah, you do. And we were done with that. And so the quality of the work was better. So, I mean, yes, there's more A's, but the quality's better, and they did a lot more, and I believe they learned a lot more. And that was, and so, not sure exactly what to say about that, but as an instructor, I'm very much better pleased with the work I got at the end of that semester than I was before. Because they had to learn it before they could go on, period.
Christy got a lot more of the multiple submissions than I think I did. I got multiple submissions on the major assignments. I didn't get multiple submissions on the journal, the threaded discussion. Occasionally I would say to them, the threaded discussion rubric says you have to do these things and interact in these ways, and the quality of your comments to each other have to be at this level. And some of them would just say, well, okay, and they took the C for that assignment. Others, really wanted this, well then I'm going to do better, and they would resubmit. I rarely got more than one submission, a draft, and then they turn it in again for the major elements. And I'll let Meg talk about what happened in hers. Christy frequently got more than that, and that was fine. But we were all open to the possibility, because we have all taught draft fashion. I'm a former English teacher. I've always incorporated draft writing. I've taught WC courses, now they're whatever, the USP. So we've done this anyway, and we believed in the idea of draft writing. So this wasn't a huge shift for us. But this is something you're going to have to wrestle with. And like you know, why we're sharing all the elements of game theory is you need to decide what feels comfortable to you to incorporate and what might not. We're pretty firm on we really love the multiple submissions, and I'm fine with more students getting good grades because I know they've got it. And for my BAS students who are all non-trad, most of whom had an Associate of Applied Science degree, this is their first course entry into college. Many of them have been out of community college for years. They needed a solid experience and mastery of these critical concepts. This is an INL course at a 3,000 level to be successful later. Go ahead.
Just one question. What was, because you had multiple submissions, how was the grading or your workflow, how did that change?
I'm going to get there, because it did. Boy, did it. You want to get to there? So let's look at some student comments. I liked how I could choose exactly which assignments I wanted to do, because that way I could pick what would help me the most. I wish that more online instructors would do something like this, because I think it was very enjoyable and made the class more fun. It deviated quite a bit from other courses, but in a good way. Despite being an online class, many other courses do not have a truly self-paced style as this one has. There was also plenty of content provided under the scrolls and magical items section within each unit quest, which I definitely felt was helpful in completing work as best we could. As far as the format of the class, I really enjoyed it. It set you up for success. The fact that you have to get a certain number of points to move on, and you can choose what you do to succeed to the next level, is awesome. And I want you to know that in an initial assignment, they tell us what are your greatest fears, what are your greatest hopes for the course. And almost universally, they say, I'm really afraid of failure. I'm afraid I can't do this. And this is what we get later. There is no question in my mind that this is the best, most well-structured online class I've ever taken. This experience was different, but as I progressed through the weeks, months, and quests, I started to feel like I was in control of my education. This course forced me to use time management skills, organizational skills, and discipline. As students, we're not going to submit A work all the time. The delivery of this class, quests, allows us to submit an assignment, receive great feedback and analysis from our instructor, and have the option to make the corrections and resubmit the assignment. To me, that is the true definition of learning. But it's not without challenges. And these will be challenges from my perspective, some of Christy's in there too, and then Meg is going to talk really specifically about her class. So, what drove me crazy? Lots of work came in at the last minute. Not everybody, though. There were students who were nice and paced, but there were some that waited till about the last 3 weeks to realize, oh my gosh, I've still got 2 quests to go. And by the way, we switched to the 6th quest where the final paper still won. And that was a shift we made between Christy's class and mine that we talked about. The good news is that all but one student finished the class. The bad news was several got behind and went furiously, and that created a lot more work for me than the other online class that I teach at the same semester that was more traditional, I guess, in its due dates and organization. The online system didn't do everything I wanted it to for the course to be even more successful, and that's an LMS problem. That's not anything to do with the gamification idea. Christy, thank God, with Meg's help, found how to figure out the path things so we could set up things the way we wanted. But the grade book still wouldn't allow us to do what we wanted, so Christy had this entire spreadsheet, that she was tracking, so that's why she knows how many total points were. Whereas the grade book, I have to total everything and won't sum it for me because it only takes 200 forward. And that's the only grade that it recognizes. It drove me a little wacky. But what I learned that I really liked. Can you tell I'm really tough? It's a Christian. I feel much overwhelmed in grading and providing feedback for most of the course, and therefore I think I do a better job. In my more traditionally structured course, everything's due on the same day. And, you know, on this unit, here's the due date. On that unit, here's the due date. Some students submit it ahead, most don't. And for consistency's sake, I thought, I'll just wait till they're all in, and then I can grade them all. And then there's 30, 40 papers staring at me. And I don't like that feeling. And then, but I want to get them back to them, because I really subscribe to prompt feedback. Before students submit a next assignment, they've got to have the feedback, and I feel overwhelmed way more than I feel here. And I was checking the course shell many times a day, way more than I did in the traditional one. I mean, I was keeping up with the threaded discussions in my traditional class and all that, but, and this one, every few minutes I was, you know, looking to see if something else would be submitted so I could get it back to them. And unfortunately, then it set the students up for assuming that I was going to get stuff back within 3 hours, and that wasn't always the case, especially at that flood at the end. But I felt less overwhelmed. I think I gave more meaningful feedback and more timely feedback. And I just said that. I was getting stuff back. And I use rubrics, of course, there was more of a relationship established between me and the students than I have ever had in an online course. They wrote back to me about things I said to them in their journal. They didn't have to respond. And suddenly I'd see there was another submission in the Dropbox, and I'd open it, and it was the student who had already done the assignment saying, I really, wanted you to know more about this. Thanks for caring that that had happened to me, and here's more of the story. And there was more of a dialogue than I've ever had in an online class, because they saw me as the resource, not the boss. They called, Skype. I keep Skype office hours in addition to online and phone and email contact. Some of them on campus stopped by my office. I never get my online students who are on campus stopping by my office, hardly ever. And I was getting people saying, oh, I just wanted, to meet you, and here's what's going on, and, I was down the hall, thought I'd stop by. Or they'd come and talk to me and get advice about other classes related to our course content. So they'd say, oh, I love what I learned about outlining, or about an annotated bibliography. I'm working on this paper for another class, but the outline doesn't seem, I'm doing an outline. Students wasn't required. They decided to use the principles from the course and said, and it just doesn't seem to flow right. Can I read it to you and talk about it? Like, yeah, of course. Lovely, happy to. So that I saw as a huge difference between this and my multicultural influences on the young child. Consequently, for the year after I get back from sabbatical, when I teach again, I want to shift that one too. Put in more podcasting, but also this. So I'm going to turn it now over to Ned.
So, bear with me because I have to have all my toys set, just so, and then I won't be able to read what I have here anyway, because I can only either see you or see my monitor. I can't see both at the same time. So, unlike Christy and Karen, I am working with students very late in their academic careers. Lots of you here teach English 4010 or have taught it. If you haven't taught it, chances are you're familiar with it because you've heard your students griping about it. It's a WC course, And there are very few cross-disciplinary or not discipline-specific WCs offered on campus. It's a required course for many programs, but we also serve just a great breadth of students who need a WC. It's an incredibly high demand. It's very hard to get into. And so students often have been trying to get into 4010 for 3 semesters. It's often the class that they take their last semester. They see it as that last obstacle, the last gate between them and graduation. Often they haven't taken an English class in 5 years. So although it's an upper level class, in some ways it feels like an introductory class. It's typically very exacting because we're really trying to prepare students for writing in the workplace. And the word I use is fussy because I think that's what I hear from students a lot. Oh, really? I need to use correct grammar all the time, not just most of the time? And this is a class in which those kinds of things are really important because the way that the students present themselves, that we present ourselves in the real world, in the workplace, is so critical. And when I teach it, it's typically very highly structured. So I think I went into this experiment. When I first heard Christy talking about it, I thought, there's no way. I mean, it's nuts. We're trying to prepare people for writing in the workplace. They're going to be dealing with deadlines. They're going to have exacting structure and demand, and there's absolutely no way. And the more I heard Christy talking about what she was doing with her course, the more I thought, God, I would give anything not to be that obstacle, not to be that barrier that my students are constantly feeling like they have to butt up against to get through the course. And tracking time, did you submit this post by Tuesday? Did you submit your follow-up post by Friday? I felt like a timekeeper more than anything else often in the class, and I was really tired of that. And so finally I thought, what the heck, I'll give it a try. Because in fact, I think in this course more than any other course that I teach, I'm really emphasizing the importance of students taking responsibility for their own work. There's not going to be anybody out there in the workplace saying, you have to do this preparatory assignment before you write that memo for me. And oh, by the way, I need 4 drafts of that memo, and I'm going to comment on all of them before I'll take your final submission. That's just not going to happen. In terms of making decisions and choices, my students probably, if they were here, would tell you one of the things that frustrates them more than anything in their courses is they'll come to me and they'll say, well, how should I frame this? How should I set this up? And I'll always say, well, it's all based on audience and purpose. So given your audience and given your purpose, what do you think you should do? And they get tired of asking me because they know they're not going to get an answer. But because of that, I think that this structure really lends itself to incorporation in 4010. At the same time, where Christy will tell you that she's not really a game person, I love games. I hate them. You can ask my husband, I don't play games. Because if I can't win, I don't want to play. Really, it's as simple as that. And I know I'm not going to win, so don't bother me. I don't play board games, I don't play card games, I do crossword puzzles, but I don't show anybody else what I've done. I just do it. And given the nature of the course, I couldn't use game terminology, both because I felt that would be disingenuous, but also because we're talking about a course that's deliberately preparing people for a professional environment. So I used many of the principles that Christy and Karen incorporated. I used self-pacing. I used the principle of resubmission. Allowed students to choose. But I used terminology, or at least I tried to use terminology, that I thought, that I felt had an appropriate kind of connotation. For example, instead of quests, my course was set up in project units. And every project unit began with an agenda. So I sort of viewed it as, we have 5 project units. It's as if you're new in a workplace, or perhaps you're an intern. And you might be working through a variety of different projects, as we often do. And for each project unit, I started with an agenda that listed the resources that were available to students and then the required items, what the outcomes would be for that project unit. I had, instead of discussions, I had think tanks. I imagined that students might, think of themselves clustered around the water dispenser. I had asked students for mini briefs and so forth. And there was something else I wanted to say about that. That's why I need this toy. Or maybe not. I guess the only other thing I wanted to say is that often I experience quite a fairly high attrition in my 40-10 class, particularly online. And I'm talking maybe 2 or 3 students, maybe 4 students who start the course. Attrition, some of the attrition comes really early, some of the attrition hits really late, and they realize they simply can't. They just are completely feeling snow. So my course, my experience was that my grade points average for the one semester that I tried this was higher than the last 2 comparable semesters. I often teach two sections at a time. This semester that I implemented these changes, I was teaching 1 section only. So I went back and I looked at the other semesters when I only taught 1 section. The average for my fall 2011 course, the average grade overall for students who completed, there are students who disappeared, and I didn't include that, but for students who completed, the average grade was about just under 85%, 84.27. The spring 2011, it was 80.8. And the spring of 2012, which is when I implemented these changes, it was 86.25. So it's not huge. It's not a huge change, but there was definitely, I think, a measurable increase in the grades, final grades earned. I don't know if that's statistically significant. I don't know if that's really a trend or it's related really to these changes, because I haven't been able to track it over time. So it's really just sort of anecdotal information. I would say that I also really experienced much less attrition. I started out with 22 students. I had 1 student who posted the very first icebreaker, which was a required post. Everyone had to do it to actually start the course. And then I didn't see her for 5 weeks. At the beginning of week 6, she emailed me and she said, well, I know I'm kind of behind, but I want to know if you think I can finish the course. And Christy had this experience. I knew there was a chance it was coming. I wanted more than anything in the entire world to sing. I was 6 weeks into the course. I could not imagine going back with her and starting over. And given the way the course was structured, I couldn't find it in myself to sing it. And I said, no, you're going to have to work your tail off. But I guess I have to let you try. She finished the class. She got a C. And she finished the class. I had only 1 student who 2 weeks before finals wrote to me and said, I just want you to know what's going on. I've had all these issues in my life. I can't finish. I have to stop here, and I'll take whatever grade you give me. But I don't think I had, and I'm sorry, I forgot to go back and look. I don't think I had any withdrawals, which is pretty unusual for my own class. and in terms of participation, I always take optional drafts. As a writing teacher, I learned a long time ago that required drafts are often, I fix that comma that you circle, and oh, that was the wrong word, I'll look it up, kind of revisions, and that makes me absolutely crazy. So I stopped taking required drafts a long time ago. I've taken optional drafts, or revisions, excuse me. I had probably half of my students actually revised, which is substantially more than I see in my typically more formally structured class. Many of them revised multiple times. I had a student who would revise every paper 5 times. Until I finally said, no, I'm not reading it anymore. It's good enough. But I also had students who, with their first submission, submitted really C work, barely C work. And with the first revision, made such changes. I had never seen the kind of improvement in revision that I saw in this course, and I really think that was because of the way the students perceived me and the way that relationship was set up. Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious, because I've done some of this before too, and what I find with some of the students is they turn in mediocre drafts, so I'll fix it.
You know, I think there's certainly the potential for that, except that I don't fix.
But how much feedback do you do, and what's the limit to your feedback, I guess is my real question.
Well, when we talked about that the other day, so this will be a little bit repetitive, and I'm sorry about that.
Sorry.
No, it's, I would say that the feedback that I give is really pushing. Why are you making these decisions? Have you thought about this? How can you incorporate more specificity, more clarity, accommodate the needs, recognize and accommodate the needs of your audience more. But I also will give feedback about, for example, trends in grammatical trends, or trends in terms of stylistic choices that I think students need to rethink. So I certainly think there's the potential for that it's possible that there's some mediocre drafts. Mostly what I saw was people feeling like they were worried about time. And so I don't think I saw as much of that as I might have, but it's certainly possible. Okay.
One of the things that I tried was, say like in a 12 page paper, is I would do some editing on maybe the first 2.5 pages, maybe 3, not
Yeah.
often, and then say,
Fix the rest.
fix the rest.
Yeah.
That didn't work.
I thought they
would get it, but
It didn't, yeah, right. Well, the other thing I think that I see a lot in this class is that students come in and they say, hey, I'm a good writer, I can do this, I know what to do. And they dash off an assignment, and they're really, really surprised at the feedback, at the response that they get. They often say, and it's a really interesting thing, and I encounter semester after semester after semester, you're asking me to unlearn everything I've learned about writing in college. And it's just stunning to me that I always agree with them. Yes, I know this is a very different discipline. We're approaching writing differently. And in fact, this is the first time for most students that they have the opportunity to write as experts. Because they know more about what they're writing about than I do. And that doesn't happen to them in their other college classes. So it is useful for them to get that kind of feedback and to really be able to think through it and realize, Julie.
Do you also build in time for peer review?
I do, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But that's one of the optional items. So I guess I wasn't as clear about that as Christy was. So I also had 5 units, and every unit culminated in at least one required element, usually more, often 2 or 3 required elements, and then an array of choices as well. And in those choices, and I also had a total of 30 points possible in those within those choices. And within those choices, of course, students could choose from threaded discussions, peer critiques, mini briefs. They could go out and do some kind of research that they thought would be compelling and useful and interesting to them, and come back and present that, journal entries, and those kinds of options. And in fact, I'm thinking that I'd like to also incorporate some oral elements in those optional choices. But peer critiques were by and far one of the most, students saw them as one of the most valuable resources to them, absolutely. So they weren't required. And I found that because things were self-paced, that sometimes the peer critiques were a little odd, because you might have somebody come in, 3 weeks after most of the class had finished peer critiques, and then what do? It just feels a little disingenuous. And I'll talk about that too. I think I'll change some of the pacing. So for me, throughout the course of the semester, there were 3 themes spell out, and they were a sense of community, both among my students and also, I think, between my students and me, but within the course, a sense of ownership. The students really articulated a real sense of ownership in the course, and then their perceptions of me, as Christy said. I really felt that I became more of a facilitator and a mentor than, the big bad ogre that was keeping me from graduating. So in terms of community, over half the class granted permission for me to use their work as examples for future semesters. Every semester I ask my students if I can have permission to use their work as examples, and I remove all of their personal information and so forth. And I always have students say yes. Usually they're the top students in the class. Usually they're a handful. I've had 1 or 2 semesters when only 1 or 2 students granted permission. This semester, over half the students said, yeah, absolutely. Use my work. And I don't care what grade I got, but you're welcome to use it. Which I think was an indication of their investment and sense of community, of course. There's another one. Yeah. And they spoke to me in their final assignment about the sense of community as well. So in the final assignment, I asked my students to write to future students in the class in their disciplines and talk about what kinds of skills they needed and what would be most useful to them. And in terms of what they needed to succeed in the course and what they would need to carry forward. And they did that to some extent. A lot of them just sort of reflected about the class. But there was some useful information that came out of that. So for example, here's a quote. I also noticed and appreciated the sense of community our class enjoyed. And that resounded throughout those final assignments. I tried to structure my responses to classmates' think tank posts with a you attitude, which again is the sense of empathy and anticipating people's needs and thinking in terms of community by providing thoughtful, thorough, and considerate posts. And every semester I include in my class a collaborative assignment, which if you teach online, well, if you teach, you know that collaboration is sometimes challenging. If you teach online, you know that collaboration online is doubly challenging, and students frequently approach it with the idea initially that there is no possible way. And I would say that typically most of my collaborative groups in my online class function pretty well. I usually have a couple that completely explode and go down in flames. They fall apart, they come to me, they're fighting, they want me to mediate. I usually have a couple of students who say there's no way. I can't do it. I can't work with other people, I have to do this assignment alone. And I let them. In this class, the collaboration began around week 8. Everyone participated in a group. Every group functioned successfully. And everyone, and I asked my students to evaluate their group members. And there were people who carried the load, and there were slackers, those kinds of things that always happen. But uniformly, every collaborative assignment was successful. And they felt that they were successful. And again, here's, I think, a quote that speaks to that. We learned to work together despite different schedules and conflicts. They were working in wikis, and they said that wikis are an excellent way to work collaboratively. So, Julianne, this is for you. In those final assignments, 10 out of 21 of the students explicitly noted the value of peer critique. And I didn't ask them about peer critique, but they explicitly noted its value. They said things like, relying on peers for evaluations and critiques will develop both cognitive and writing skills. I was thankful for the critiques. They're designed to help me learn. I think my papers turned out much stronger with my classmates' input. And your fellow classmates may prove to be an indispensable resource. Their input could be invaluable in editing and revising your documents. And again, with peer critique, I often have students who say, I hate it. I hate it. It feels like a waste of my time. It feels like, you know, my co-students don't know anything. So why should I ask them for feedback? I want feedback from you. Presumably, the students who felt that way didn't do peer critique. But most of them did. Again, the sense of ownership. 11 out of 22 students, or 21 students, sorry, noted the importance of planning and explicitly wrote about that. Planning, time management, and or self-discipline. So, for example, they said time management will play a vital role in your success. Self-discipline will help you stay motivated and to complete the work in the allotted time frame, which is interesting because those time frames were self-imposed, not imposed by me. Properly planning your project will allow you to work within the guidelines of the assignment itself as well as the due date. And like Christy and Karen, I provided suggested due dates, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a couple of minutes as well. And then I saw an awful lot of revisions. And some of those revisions, I'll be honest, I got tired of reading the same paper over and over again. I learned some strategies for dealing with revisions, but some of them were just stunning, I mean, really stunning. And so it was worthwhile to me. And I think to them. And then the perceptions, I think, and this is what I perceive as being my students' perceptions of me. And I really think, you know, they came to me, they saw me as a facilitator and a mentor. I got comments like, thank you for your guidance this semester. And the you attitude you employ in your critiques and comments motivated me to continue with revisions to better absorb the material. And I'd like you to know how much I appreciate you and the time you did. You've helped me a great deal. And this is not there to, you know, sort of wave my own flag here, but I don't usually get comments like that from my students. So it feels good, and it feels like, you know, there was some very positive relationship. Yeah. Yeah. I also had two requests from two of my online students asked me to write them letters of recommendation. And I've never had an online student ask me for a letter of recommendation. I've been teaching online, I think, for 9 years, this course. And I've never had a student ask me for a letter of recommendation. I had students come and visit me in my class. I had students ask me to edit work that they're doing for something else. Or, by the way, I'll be applying for a job, and would you please edit my resume and cover letter? And I always say yes, and my fee is $30 an hour, because that's what I charge as a technical editor, and usually they don't come back. However, I've never had this happen before. So all that said, now's the time for absolute honesty. At the end of the semester, 2/3 of the way into the semester, maybe half of the way into the semester, maybe even earlier than that, I really started wondering what the heck I'd done. I felt like I had no control of my class. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was terrified with each unit that students wouldn't finish and get to the next unit, and that they wouldn't finish the class. I learned more about myself as an instructor doing this than I learned about my students, I think. I really realized that I need to have a little bit more control than I had this semester. I needed to have a sense of when we might be moving on. I needed to be confident that students were with me, or at least with the course. So I was pretty sure that I wasn't going to do this again until Christy and Karen and I started working on this project, and I started thinking about the things that came out of the course that were really very positive and very productive. But I will make some pretty significant changes going into next semester based on some of these limitations. I would say that students, as Christy and Karen both said, the alien, sort of sense of unfamiliarity with the course structure initially was really hard for students. And it was hard for me too, because I didn't know what I was doing. I think that will be less difficult for me in future semesters, and maybe that will make it easier for students as well. But that was definitely a factor for them, particularly initially, but it really did dissipate very quickly. But what didn't dissipate in the same way was a sense of anxiety about where they should be, where they were and where they should be. Even though I gave them suggested due dates, I got a lot of emails about, well, where's everybody else in the class? I'm really worried that I might be behind. And so I think I need to be doing a lot more communication up front with students about that. Where are you? Where should you be? And also about what's going to happen next. I want to do much more previewing and much more scaffolding for students, so that although they have to accomplish X to get to Y, they know what Y is going to look like, or they have a sense of what Y is going to look like. And revisions. Again, there's that constant challenge of really communicating with students what's a viable revision, and what's not worth anybody's time. And I want to make the most, all of us make the most of those revisions. I think I will limit the number of revisions. I felt like I was grading on the time, and partially because of our course platform, it was difficult for me to see what had happened at any point. So I spent an awful lot of time going back through things to see what I'd graded and what I hadn't graded. And that was frustrating for me, but perhaps not so much for the students. So managing pacing and grading, I think, are big goals for me in future semesters. I also found that, and I knew this, but I had to test this. It's really hard for me to go back to an assignment that most of my students submitted in week 3 in week 8. I'm done with it. I'm emotionally done with it, and I don't want to go there. So I will incorporate some firm deadlines. Within units, there'll be a lot of flexibility. There'll be a little bit more scaffolding, but there will be firm deadlines. The first draft of this assignment has to be in by this day. And then, again, this issue of control. Karen mentioned it. Christy mentioned it. It's been a real interesting process for me to figure out where that balance of control lies, and I think it'll be an ongoing challenge. So.
I can see this. So, I mean, I guess we've all talked about looking forward. I think to a certain extent what we're going to change. There's definitely some changes that I will be making. I don't think it's going to be that drastic, but there will be some small things that I will do as I go through. And I actually wrote one down the other day is I'm going to require that everything they get points for will be mastery. They get points for it. If they're going to get points for it to move on, it will have to be mastery. So that will be 70% of whatever. That wasn't the case before. They could get it like 20% on something, get 2 points or whatever, and that can count. But everything they actually get points for will be mastery, period. that's just one example. But I think that, I know that I'm doing it again next semester. I will say that last year I decided to redesign this course literally. It was like 2 weeks before the semester started. I don't recommend that. That was a really bad idea. Because I spent, it was tough. But I will say the first semester, I think the first semester is really hard because it's a completely change of paradigm for you. It's not just the students that is doing. It's not just the students that are saying, "What do you want me to do?" You're also saying, "I don't know what to do." There's some stress for you. And Meg mentioned at one point that I had a student that hadn't done anything, and it was a real learning experience for me because I had done. Look at me! I'm making this entire change in my class. I'm changing these paradigms. And then this student that I hadn't heard from for like 4 weeks suddenly pops back in and starts doing stuff. And I'm like, no freaking way you can pass my class now. It's like the middle of October or something. I'm like, no way, my class is too hard to do that. This is too rigorous, you can't be doing that. I'm like, and I'm sitting there going, you know what? And I sat down with myself and I said, hey, listen to yourself here. You have set this up so that they can do this. You gave them this choice. Now you have to let them do it. Let them do it. and I assumed, incorrectly turned out, that if you waited that long, you're just a slacker and you're just trying to catch up and get some kind of grade. This guy actually looked at the class at the beginning of the semester and said, okay, here's how I'm going to arrange my life. And it was very conscious thought, on this date, I'm going to start working this class because I believe I can get through this class in that amount of time. And the guy ended up getting an A in the class. And I did not think, I was the first one to say, no, I'm just not going to grade his stuff. He can't move if I don't grade. I mean, that's childish, really. But that's where I was at one moment. I'm just not going to grade that. And then it was like, okay, that's not really, because it is tough to go back to a grade that you're grading everybody. And you're like, I don't want to grade that again. I'm done with that one. But it really made a difference to his life. Like, he had arranged his life in a specific way so that this could work for him. And it did. And it worked for him. And it taught me a lot about me and my issue of control as well. But once I got used to the idea, it actually became kind of freeing. So the grading thing also, I found it to be grading to be a lot less onerous than it had been in the past. And the reason I said that is, as Karen said, you get 30 papers in on Tuesday, and you want to get them done, and you kill yourself for the entire week getting them done. In this method, they come in kind of one paper at a time, you grade one Tuesday, and one comes in on Thursday, you grade on Thursday, and it's really easy. You have to have really good rubrics for that, because you have to be able to keep consistent. But I don't feel like I was consistent when I graded 30 papers in a row. Because honestly, by the time I got through 10, 15 of them, I was tired of grading these papers. And I do not believe that the feedback I gave the last 15 was as good as the feedback I gave the first 15. I know it wasn't, because I would get so tired of that. So just the idea of being able to, go through them a little bit of time when I was fresh was really actually great. I actually felt a lot more comfortable in my class. I think I'm just going to end. Yeah, we talked about all this stuff. So let's go through a little bit here. This is some of the last quotes. This is fun, and I need all the fun I can get. And the idea that a class was fun was kind of an interesting concept for a lot of these kids, actually. And you cannot fail this class unless you choose to. And I think that was probably the take-home message for me as an instructor. That was it. You can't fail this unless you actually choose to. And you saw in our grades, some students chose to get B's and C's. They chose that. They said, my life is chaos. I'm going to decide to get through this class with a C, taking the C. And they chose that. And they were okay with the C. They weren't fighting about the C because they were stoked to have the C because they chose which C. And that made a big difference. And so I think that's kind of, that's going to finish. Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Thinking. As an early childhood person, I believe in learning through play and the value of student choice and allowing them to be playful. That doesn't mean in early childhood any more than in this that through play there's no rigor or there's no scaffolding or there's no learning. And this freed me to be more playful in how I approach the class and the students. And therefore, it allowed the students to be more playful, if you will, because of even the game terminology that Christy put in. And they felt like they were playing, but they were learning. And the scaffolding and the mastery still happened. And I would love to see students who took our course and then took 4010, English 4010 later, because most of my students in BAS do, if there's any transference of skills. A lot of us wonder, why don't we see more transference of skills in writing or other things from English 1010 into our disciplinary classes? And it would be interesting to me to see the students who've taken English 1010 and then done our BAS course or done Meg's course, to see our other people seeing changes in students' understanding and ability.
We're going to take a 5 minute, Meg's going to make an announcement. And we're going to take questions during like the free time so that we can let Cody and Athena go ahead and go. So we're going to let Meg have an announcement, and then we're going to have a little break, and then Cody and Athena are going to take off.